HCAM programming is supported by our viewers.
And by WPC Pest Control, a family-owned business for over 35 years. Owners Jim and Rebecca Mazzucchelli provide honesty, respect, and integrity, performing safe and effective pest control services. They service your home like it's their home, because when you have kids, you know what families want, a safe, pest-free home.
And by Golden Pond Assisted Living, honoring resident choice, dignity, and independence. Our health and wellness focus keeps residents active. Golden Pond, state-of-the-art senior housing and healthcare services.
You're watching HCAM TV, and for more Hopkinton, visit HCAM Ed.
I make 9. That's assuming Nisha is a member.
Through the chair, you're live on HCAM TV.
If Nisha's not, then somebody else is.
Okay.
I'm almost positive Nisha is.
Okay. I think we'll wait a little bit to see if someone else pops in. Did you get any emails indicating some people might not make it?
Nope, but Madhu just
there's
joined.
Madhu. Beautiful. Welcome,
No,
Madhu.
I've not heard of anybody not coming.
All right, but looking at my screen, I think we now have 5 ZAC members. All right, but looking at my screen, I think we now have... And we got an echo.
Yeah, I'm going to turn, Bob, I'm going to mute you.
All right, my turn to read the script. Good evening. The open meeting of the Zoning Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2023. First, the new law allows public bodies to continue providing live, adequate alternative means of public access to the deliberations of the public body, instead of holding meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public. Adequate alternative means may include, without limitation, providing public access through telephone, internet, or satellite-enabled audio or video conferencing, or any other technology that enables the public to clearly follow the proceedings of the public body in real time. Second, the new law authorizes all members of a public body to continue participating in meetings remotely. The open meeting law's requirement that a quorum of the body and a chair be physically present at the meeting location remains suspended. For this meeting, the Zoning Advisory Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the ZAC agenda, identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. I'll throw additionally, although it's not on the script, if you are not speaking, it would be helpful if you could keep yourself muted until it's your turn to speak. As a preliminary matter, this is Ted Barker-Hook, Zoning Advisory Committee Co-Chair. Permit me to confirm that all members are present and can hear me. Please respond with present when I call your name. Mary Larson Marlowe.
Mary Larson Marlowe, present.
Ron Foisey.
Ron Foisey, present.
Arnold Cohen. Nisha Nanawe. Madhu Chandrasekhar.
Present.
Rachel Rawson.
Present.
Elise Mihajlovsky.
Elise Mihajlovsky, present.
And Curtis Smithson. Nope. Staff, John, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. John Gelsich.
John Gelsich, present.
Wonderful. I think I made it through my first job as chair. Let's see if we can keep it rolling. I wonder, am I allowed to do the minutes first, or do we have to go in order of what you published?
You can do the minutes first.
I'm kind of used to that from my other committee. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes from Monday, October 24th? And if so, does anybody have any edits they'd like to share? Going once, twice. I would love to entertain a motion to accept the minutes as written up.
So moved. Mary Larson Marlowe.
And a second?
Second.
I guess we got to do a roll call vote. Where's my list again? Here we go. Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Ron Foisey,
Yes.
Madhu,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Ted Barker Hook is a yes. Did I miss any members of the committee? I think that passes unanimously. All right. Our first agenda item is our joint meeting with the Sustainable Green Committee. Welcome to our time spot. And what I'd like to do, I think, is just pass the stage on to you and let you let us know what you've been working on and how you think we might be able to work together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm Jeff Rowland. I'm chair of the Sustainable Green Committee and representing the Climate Action Work Group of that committee today. If I have permission, I'd love to share a brief presentation. Does John need to give that to me? All right. Still disabled.
Try now.
There we go. Thank you, sir. All right. How's that look? Cool. Thank you. So yeah, we're here to talk about the Climate Action Plan today. So first off, what is net zero? I'm sure you're all quite familiar with the concept in general, but this is a brief overview of global emissions sources and sinks. So net zero occurs when these balance out, when the sources of emissions equal the sinks of emissions, what the Earth can naturally absorb. What we're looking to do is, it's a global problem, but Hopkinton's trying to do its part. So there's multiple steps here, but broadly, which ones we're trying to tackle right now is first do a greenhouse gas inventory. What are Hopkinton's emissions across municipal, residential, businesses, and just understand that at the moment. The other aspects are going to be a net zero resolution, saying Hopkinton is going to hit net zero by this date. Broadly, the federal and state governments have targeted net zero or 50% reduction by 2030, 75% by 2040, and 100% by 2050. That's against 1990 baselines, which gets complicated, especially when you've got a town that's grown significantly since then. But still, 100% by 2050 is the goal. And a climate action plan, which is the realistic steps that we need to take to get there. So here's a look at Hopkinton's emissions at the moment, our initial greenhouse gas inventory. There's a bunch here, but broadly, you can see that passenger vehicles, residential buildings, and commercial and industrial are three big areas we need to tackle. It's important to mention that there are known gaps in this data. For example, we don't have anything for municipal waste and recycling here. There's been some reporting issues that the DPW is looking into for us. But given what we've seen from other towns, we don't anticipate that to be, on the scale of these big three. Other things such as tree cover, deforestation, things like that aren't easily accounted for as well. So this is just the information available from state databases. We've gone through the Metro West Area Planning Council process to get all this data. And the process we're following is this fall, we're collecting community input from folks such as yourself and just the community at large. Starting in the winter time, we'll be working with a consultant from the MAPC to formalize the process a little bit more. We're trying to kickstart things a little bit here. By January, if we come up with any town articles pertinent to this, we'll aim to submit them. And springtime, we're hoping to have the action plan submitted for acceptance by the select board, and ongoing annually, we'll need to report progress on the town's progress towards net zero. So at a high level, we've broken things down into 6 key areas: green energy, such as solar, municipal aggregation; buildings, energy efficiency and weatherization; electrification, such as switching from gas furnaces to heat pumps; any zoning issues that can help in those matters; building codes to ensure that buildings operate more efficiently; transportation, EVs, and the charging of them. I think there's a matter on the agenda tonight, in fact, on that. Walking, biking, transit; environmental issues such as open and green space, lawns, water usage, trees, native plants, and food; waste and recycling, reduce, reuse, recycle, compost, and industrial matters. And as far as general goals, that's kind of our process, such as the climate action plan and annual reporting, plus public awareness campaigns. So specifically why we're talking to you folks tonight, here are some ideas we have for discussion on areas we could potentially partner, such as incentivizing home and business electrification, minimizing our dependence on fossil fuels, choosing electric methods when we're building new construction, such as instead of committing to new fossil fuel usage, new gas lines put in, let's just jump to heat pumps as soon as we can. That's the way the world is going. And then just all electric appliances, like your water heater as well. There are heat pump water heaters, induction cooking, and electric clothing dryers, other ideas. What can we do to encourage EV purchases through having a charging infrastructure that's available, like we'll I believe talk about later. Municipal and businesses, there are ideas in progress. And residential, what can we do there? What can we do to support renewable energy development, specifically solar? And can we prioritize developed properties like existing rooftops and parking lot canopies in maybe agricultural land, instead of the cutting of mature forest, which is a touchy subject these days, or always really. And native plants and lawn reduction. Are there ways that we can encourage people to plant more native trees, more native plants, rather than ornamentals, which don't add any environmental benefits? And how do we ensure that when we commit to those, that they actually survive? And also, when we create new developments, how do we discourage fully clear cutting lots and leave existing trees when necessary? I think this is the point where we're essentially going to open it up for conversation. I tried to get through that as quick as possible.
Thank you, Jeff. I wonder really quickly before we discuss, John, do you have a copy of that slideshow? And if you do, could you forward it to the rest of us for looking at down the road? And if you don't, Jeff, could you send a copy to John?
Absolutely. We'll send that to you.
Yeah, I don't have it, so Jeff will send it to me and I will pass it out.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful. That'd be great.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone from our group drops it in the chat in a sec.
Is there anyone else from the Sustainable Green Committee that wants to add on to Jeff before we open it up wider?
Thank you. This is Amy Groves, also from that committee. I just wanted to say that text chat was not enabled, so we will forward it by email for your meeting minutes. One thing I did want to add to what Jeff said earlier about the 2050 target date, that is kind of a global target date and a national target date, a state target date, in fact. It is something to think about very carefully because it's incumbent upon, for us all to reach 2050 together, it's incumbent upon those of us who live in areas that have a fair amount of green space and very little industry, very little large polluting industry, to actually do better than 2050. So a conservative estimate for Hopkinton target might be 2045 instead. And in fact, we would have incremental targets before then. For instance, one possible incremental target before then would be 2040 for all town buildings, including the schools and everything associated with the town. So that's less than 20 years away. So it really makes it very tricky. We have to think very carefully and right away about how to, address some of these things that Jeff was talking about. Just wanted to put that in there. Thank you.
I have a question for the SGC before we get into more detail. Do you feel like we're moving towards 2050 or 40 goals starting at a standstill? Are we at a walk in that direction right now? Are we jogging, trotting? How are we doing right now, and how much do we need to speed up?
We need to speed up everything significantly.
Are we standing still right now, or are we walking?
It depends which topic we're talking about. In some ways, we're standing still. In some ways, we're regressing. In some ways, we're crawling. I don't know if we're running at anything yet.
Where are we regressing?
Every year when like the IPCC reports come out, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the annual conference, UN conference, the numbers get worse. Emissions continue to rise. So Hopkinton itself, maybe not regressing. Globally, we are.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working on numbers.
I thought I'd start. I just had a couple of comments and a question or two, and then maybe, did you have something, Mary?
No, I'm just waiting for you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We have spent a good amount of time over the last few years, and we're going to take it up again this year, talking about tree protection, particularly clear cutting, particularly as it connected to solar farm development. And when we've had those discussions before, there were all sorts of different factors we were considering. But a question I have for you, because I found conflicting science the last time we brought it up, is if we only look at carbon impacts of solar farms, where have you found the balance between losing trees but gaining solar electricity? And is that balance equal on a bigger scale versus the town? That is to say, if we chop down Hopkinton trees, but the electricity is leaving Hopkinton, is that part of what we should be thinking about?
Hot topic. Paul, you want to take that?
Well, maybe just on the emissions balance, that within a relatively short period of time, relative to the life of a solar photovoltaic installation, you would make up for the you would greatly surpass the CO2 emissions that are, or the CO2 sink effect of the trees that you would have lost. So from a CO2 emissions balance, you from a pure kind of carbon emissions accounting, it's not, the trees don't do that much. So the answer is, so it's really the more what kind of local environment do we want to live in, and I think that goes beyond beyond the greenhouse gas inventory side of the calculation. I would say that there's still quite a lot of room for a lot more rooftop and parking lot canopy solar in Hopkinton. There's a lot has been installed, but a lot of houses that could put those up, and I don't think it's going to there's no need to aggressively look for forests to cut down to build solar farms in Hopkinton for either Hopkinton or Massachusetts to meet its net zero goals. So I think those are probably the 2 points I would make. From the energy balance, the photovoltaic wind, but that's obviously not the only consideration. And we have lots of other unused sites other than pristine forest that we could be using, both locally and generally.
Thanks. I didn't mean to indicate that that's the only thing to consider, and we certainly weren't in the past, but I was finding conflicting stuff on that in the past, and I was curious. I guess I have one other question or comment. An issue, I'm also on the Conservation Commission, and we talk about invasive species all the time, but we can only talk about invasive species within the wetlands or in the buffer zones around wetlands. But it struck me recently that perhaps a discussion that we could open up, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on such a discussion and how they fit with your goals, is whether in upland developments, if we have some guidelines, rules, bylaws about dealing with invasive species that are on upland developments. I'm thinking if there's Japanese knotweed, but it's nowhere near the wetlands, and a developer haphazardly digs them up and throws them somewhere else, we are pretty quickly spreading invasive species. I have no clue how to move closer to a guideline or a bylaw with that, but it's been something I've been thinking about. I am curious if the SGC has been thinking about that. Is that an interesting thought to you? Is that outside of your scope of interest?
We've definitely had conversations about invasive species, native plants as well, but invasives in particular, like we've talked to the Open Space Preservation Committee recently, where invasives are a big topic for them on the properties that they manage. And we're looking for areas to partner with them on that as well. For such a bylaw, theoretically, that you suggest, I don't know how you would enforce it. How do you track them effectively? There's certainly a problem.
I think enforcement is a problem with just about any regulations we put out there, regardless of what committee it's coming from. But let me open the floor. I've talked a lot. Anybody else from any committee or anything have thoughts? Mary, go ahead.
Thank you. I was wondering whether or not you guys have access to data on how many solar buildings there are, how many buildings have rooftop solar or parking lot solar in the town, and if not, how we can go about that.
So we do have some of that data, not in the most structured and perfect way, but we do have the listing of at least all of the solar installation plants in Hopkinton that have applied for the state incentives, the SMART incentive, and some additional, even more comprehensive data than that. I can't just off the top of my head quote you those numbers, but I could get them to you after this meeting.
It would be interesting. But do we also have residential? Do we have anything on residential?
Yes, that.
Oh, that does include that.
That includes,
okay.
And it's, by number, of course, it's predominantly residential.
Okay, I understand that. And so, I certainly have seen an increase in rooftop solar and residential, but also in some industrial business installations as well. So that's good. And the other thing that we would perhaps want to track, and just to have it kind of, you could break it down possibly into goals of how the town is doing. And that would be for heat pump installations or recent weatherization programs in different, in residential and in industrial buildings. So I don't know if there's data available to you that's decent on those numbers, or if it's something that could be voluntarily collected within town to start to track that kind of thing, to encourage people. Peer pressure.
I know we've definitely been encouraging Mass Save and have had some, because that's done by different contractors. We can get data from individual contractors, but it's hard to get a full view of the weatherization people have done. But that's definitely a great tool available to folks to be able to insulate homes and have air sealing and all of that. And then it's also a way to get financial support for heat pumps and even more programs around that with recent laws passed. So, but I don't think we've had tracking of heat pumps yet. I don't think we've been able to find.
Just on that, Nicole, we have found some good data from some of the Census Bureau surveys. I think it's called the American Community Survey that breaks down the housing stock down to more or less the zip code level. So for Hopkinton, that gives us exactly what we want, and it tells you how many houses are heated by oil, by gas, by wood. Currently, it just says electric, so you don't really know whether that's electric heat pump. But I would expect that as we go forward here, that in not too many years from now, and those are annual data, that we'll start to see a heat pump category pop up in that data table, and then we will be able to track that at least on a kind of statistical survey basis rather than counting each and every house. There's also, I think, some of our committee members have been talking with the assessors department in town government, and they do have that data at least for when projects are construction or renovations are completed, and we may be able to get access to that data, which would be more of an exact count.
So the important thing is that the gas and oil numbers go down over time. Whether they're electric, even if they're really inefficient electric, the electric grid is greening faster than gas and oil are.
True.
I have kind of a follow-up question, and maybe it's one that Ron would be interested in hearing. I'm thinking about the commercial properties and roof-mounted or parking lot covering solar installments. It seems to me that there are two routes to that. One is, I don't know if Price Chopper owns their building or if they're paying a landlord, but for the sake of discussion, let's pretend they own their building. One would be, Price Chopper, we expect that you will supply X% of your electricity through solar that you mount on your building. That would encourage more solar and less other uses, carbon emission uses. A second plan would be to find ways to encourage Price Chopper to lease out their roof to a solar voltaic company that they can use to harvest. Have you thought about, I could be way wrong. As I remind the committee over and over, I'm a high school history teacher. I am not a real estate magnate. I don't run a grocery store or a solar company. Have you thought about those routes? Is there another route that I'm not thinking of that we could, as a committee, pursue?
I think it's a good idea.
Both routes.
Yeah. One of the supplementary slides you'll see in the slide deck is contains a link to MAPC's Net Zero Playbook, and they have a chapter on zoning changes that could be used to accelerate the transition to net zero. And I believe that one of those is in fact something like an energy standard for new, for new commercial and industrial building construction, which I think would, at least for new construction, would maybe address the kinds of things you're talking about in the, looking for on-site generation as well as carbon-free heating and cooling.
Other questions or comments from the committee?
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Ron.
I'm wondering at what point there's going to be some kind of a cost benefit analysis of this that indicates if we spend this amount of money, we can get to 2050. If we spend this much more, it'll be 2040. What's that going to do to the average household's overall cost of heating and powering their system? Is it going to be less than we're currently doing, or is it going to be more, and by what order of magnitude?
Very hard to figure out broadly. Every building's different, right? In general, heat pumps and weatherization improvements are going to be worth it long term. But in the short term, yeah, anytime you upgrade your equipment, it's costly, right? So that is going to be the challenge, and that's why we want to work on this now, because we have 20 plus years. But as as aging equipment cycles out, we want people to be making the choice and investing in the electrified version now, rather than committing to gas, to oil again for another however many years that equipment's going to last.
Yeah. Follow up, Ted?
Sure, go ahead.
Just in the timing, I think, is a critical issue, because as things wear out and need to be replaced, that becomes very cost effective. If we have an accelerated schedule that forces corporations and businesses to have to upgrade halfway through the useful life of their plant and equipment, it's going to escalate the costs, and ultimately businesses are passing increased costs along to their customers, and we're their customers, which means we're going to, so it's just that timing and the speed. Replacement is a lot better than retrofitting, in my opinion.
Through the chair, yes, indeed, it's always better to plan ahead rather than try to retrofit. Retrofitting is always a bad thing. But one of the things we want to do is we're meeting with stakeholders like this group, but lots of other stakeholders all throughout town, and that would include the Chamber of Commerce. And I think one of the things we wanted to talk about when we do that is talk about all the incentives that are available that either business owners or property owners might not know about. It's constantly changing. And some of this is governmental, it's outside of our hands, but as we see more and more bills passing at the state level and the national level, and we anticipate even more, we get more and more incentives. So part of that is to make sure that people know about that so that they can take advantage of the incentives and also do some long-term planning. So that, eventually they actually, in some cases, you can actually make out pretty well by doing this stuff. So, thank you.
Anybody else? Last thoughts?
If I could add something. So
Please
we
do.
also, so we have another slide in the deck related to part of the bill that passed in Massachusetts this summer, which is related to new construction or major renovations. And so it's a pilot program that will be with 10 towns in Massachusetts that are going to be selected next July. The towns already have to, I guess, by that date, have voted on it as a town, or if they have a mayor or city council, would have had to vote on it there to opt into this. But it would be doing fossil fuel-free construction for new buildings. And there's a few exceptions where there's some businesses where very energy intensive where that would be excluded from that, but all new residential and many businesses would fit into that. I don't think this is something that we're looking to try to be one of those first 10 towns. I think there would be a lot that would have to happen in order to get there. But I think we should be kind of thinking about this, because the nice thing about this is all of those homes from that date forward won't need a retrofit down the road, you know? And so maybe what we can be thinking about is how do we incentivize something like this, even if we're not restricting that you can't have a fossil fuel connection. What could we be doing to encourage that it's more attractive or favorable to build a fully electrified home or business as there is new construction? So we have a couple links in the notes there for more information if you're not familiar with this, or the actual text of this new law that passed. But just wanted to highlight that for awareness. We don't know if in a year or two, if this pilot program is successful, are they going to open it up to 20 or 30 towns, and will we want to try to be one of those, or will they actually say on a state level, let's apply this everywhere because this is so successful and so critical to meeting 2050. It's kind of hard to know where it's going to go from here, but hopefully we'll learn a lot from how it works in these towns.
Great.
Thanks for Paul and Nicole for pointing out that I stopped the slideshow a little too soon.
Again, hopefully we'll all have a chance to review in the coming days, weeks before we meet again. Anybody else from either committee, commission have thoughts? Go ahead, Mary, please.
So this is me like admitting I'm like kind of dumb on some of this stuff. It, you know, and I read a lot, but some of your terminology of saying, you know, a fully electrified house, things like that. I think it would be very useful in public outreach, you know, even just like on, you know, when you have a page on the town website, you know, that refers to, you know, what is the latest and greatest way to do it, you know, you know, when I think fully electrified, it's like, well, I remember that, you know, electricity, you know, that still uses fossil fuels as well to generate it. So yes, solar is good and wind is good and all that, but turning everything over to electric in your house, that's kind of been a controversial somewhat in the past. And so, if there's new data on the way to go, or, the best focus forward, that I think that would be really important to share, because, even fairly well-read people might not be up on it.
I think that's a good point. I think our lessons with solar hit that exactly. I think if you asked the people here, are you in favor of solar power? I think all of us would say, sure. But then how you get that solar power is a whole different discussion. And I think that's probably what you're saying with a fully electrified house. It depends on where the electricity is coming from and how you're getting it, right?
It does. And go ahead, Nicole.
Well, I was just going to say, that's absolutely right, that our electric system is, and Massachusetts, it's not that renewable. I think, what are we at, 20%? I don't know if we're even
it goes up 2% a year by state law, so we're around 20% at the moment.
Yeah, so that's not particularly high, but that is going to be hopefully aggressively changing over the next years and decades. So when you have an appliance that is powered by fossil fuel, powered by oil or natural gas, that will always be emitting carbon and always be powered by fossil fuel. When it's powered by electricity, it will get greener and greener over time, because the grid is going to be getting greener over time. And so this is all kind of happening at the same time. And because it's going to take us years, decades to electrify everything, it's also going to take decades probably to get to 100% renewable or carbon-free energy. So it's kind of all just moving in the same direction. So you're absolutely right. Like doing it today does not 100% get you there. But if within an individual household, they put solar on the roof and switch to all electric appliances, you can almost think about like, as that individual home, you are trying to get towards your own net zero. Now, your electricity generated from solar is not, I mean, depending on how you set it up, but for the most part, that's going back to the grid. So maybe powering somebody else, but you can think of it kind of on an individual level. You're trying to get to that net zero. And we're also thinking on a town level, how to do that. So yeah, it's going to take time, and but that's the direction to move things. That makes sense.
Thank you.
And Mary, your point on like how do people know what to do, right? So our committee is working on outreach. Like what are the big things that folks can do? We're working on building out our website. We go to a whole bunch of events, all year to try to talk about these topics with anyone interested. So work in progress. We'll hopefully be doing more over the coming years.
John?
This is my unsolicited comment and question.
Hey, John, do you have a comment or question? I'd like to solicit that.
I do. I don't know what the Sustainable Green Committee can do. I don't know what the Planning Board can do or Zach, but I think personally, it's difficult to find a reputable solar installer because I cannot find any information on who's good, who's not, how is it going to be a scam? And for someone who is supportive of green infrastructure, it makes me hesitant to jump in for a $25,000, $30,000 cost. If there's anything Sustainable Green Committee can do to provide that information on, here are some reputable solar installers, and I don't know how that would work, but resources at the state level, something so that I know if I go and contract with this person, I'm not going to get a sales pitch. I'm not going to get scammed and find, solar not installed on my roof, but paying the same amount of money, that kind of stuff. And education about leases versus purchasing, because I know that that's a huge red flag sometimes as well. And so I think educating the residents on how to go about it in an easier way is probably going to incentivize, through less anxiety, more solar installations.
I echo that. I would love to have solar on my roof, but taking that first step is expensive and scary for exactly what you just said.
And so through the chair, I know that Paul and I are going through this right now with heat pumps, and we had trouble with vendors. We both did. It took us a long time to find the right vendors. And so we're thinking about legally, we don't want to get the town into any trouble by sort of endorsing certain vendors and not others, as a town committee. What we thought we might do would be to share personal stories with a proper legal disclaimer saying that this is not an endorsement, but people can share personal stories. They wouldn't even have to be from our committee. And we're going to put those out, publish those and say, I did this. This is what worked for me. This was what did not work for me. And I picked this vendor. We might be able to do it that way.
So my concern with that is, how do you solicit these recommendations? Because you can have shady companies making their own recommendations, right? So
yeah, I think it has to be a personal story. Like, this is my house in Hopkinton and this is what we did.
That's fine. I think that will help. It's just people who don't know those people, it's still just a sales pitch. So just like, I don't know, I'm just trying to take the most cynical view and be like, it's, everyone's trying to scam me out of my money. How do you present information that people can read and be like, okay, this I trust, it's verified, it's, true, and I'm not going to hold these people responsible if something goes wrong. Tall task.
Is there anything else? If not, I want to thank the Sustainable Green Committee for coming. I think we have kind of two overarching big goals, it seems to me, this year. One of them is to discuss affordable housing, and the other is to discuss a greener town, whether it be through tree protection or EV bylaws or solar requirements for homes. I think we're on the same page that this is a good time to talk about it. With that in mind, without wanting to give anybody on the Sustainable Green Committee any extra homework, I would be very thankful if we had at least one member of the SGC join us as often as you can for meetings. I know you're not officially a ZAC member, but the public is always, always welcome. Too many witches spoil the brew, but we don't have nearly enough witches right now. So I would be really thankful if we could have your expertise and your work as often as possible with us for our discussions. But we all have busy lives, and I don't want to, overly pressure you, but I think it would be helpful from our end.
Thank you for the suggestion, Ted. Yeah, I love that, because my follow-up question for this was, how do we work better together? That sounds perfect. But I understand the meeting overload.
Yeah. So I leave that up to you. And if you guys can join one, I don't know, all five if you want to. I'm not going to limit you. But I think that would be helpful to both of our terms, years, goals.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
One last chance for last thoughts before we move on to the next agenda item. Nope. All right. So thank you again. You're welcome to stick around as we move forward. After all, it's stuff you may be interested in. But I'm going to grab the next agenda item. Our next agenda item is the proposed zoning article on exclusionary bylaw, flexible community development bylaw. That's a mouthful. But that's essentially the article. I've highlighted the purpose as written. The purpose of this article is to increase the inventory of affordable housing in Hopkinton. When we discussed this last time, I think most of our discussion hovered around percentages for how many new dwellings to new affordable units, where that cutoff is. My memory is that as it stands right now, if you have a development that hits 10 new dwellings, then you must provide one affordable dwelling. And we were talking about whether that's really meeting the goal, because you could have 19 and that would be one, and that's not really the 10%, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't have a firm suggestion, but I want to throw out a thought that I had and see if this is workable for anybody. We were told, I'm having a bit of a brain hiccup, the realtor who was with us, who's always helpful to us.
Chuck Joseph.
I'm sorry?
Chuck Joseph.
Chuck, yes, thank you very much. Chuck said that generally he didn't think that realtors would feel like a 10% cutoff would be onerous for affordable units in addition to the other non-affordable units. But then that leaves us with, do you have to have 10 units before we get an affordable? Mary suggested that her experience through the planning board is that few developments hit that 10. They tend to stop at 8 or 9 new dwellings, which saves them from meeting that affordable housing requirement. So here was a thought I had that I'd love to hear your thoughts for. What if the affordable housing requirement kicked in after the 5th or 6th new dwelling, and then every 10 after that? So that would mean if you built a 5th new unit, you would have to provide an affordable housing unit. If you went to 6, 7, 8, 9, although I don't know if this works, John, with the percentages we talked about, you could build your 9th and there's still an affordable in there, and that's that 10% that Chuck Joseph talked about. Then if you go above 10 up to 15, there's your next spot. Again, I haven't completely worked out the math, but my thought was to lower the initial threshold and then build from that every 10 units, instead of making it 10, then the 20th, then the 30th. Does that make some sense, what I'm trying to think through? But I don't know exactly how that works with rounding and percentages and things like that. I wonder if anybody has any reaction to that idea. Rachel, please.
Through the chair, I do. I am supportive of having some affordable housing units for all developments. And I think Chuck sort of said that as well, that like they're supportive of some housing. I feel like it's the kind of ask where we could put a minimum in. So instead of trying to do the math for the developer, just say we have a minimum that you have to do, and you decide how to reach that minimum or between the minimum and the 10%. So sort of give them a little more flexibility, but still requiring that there's a certain amount that they do. And I think they would support that. And I think actually putting maybe numbers to it just might cause more conversations versus just saying there's a minimum number.
Are you suggesting that any development meet a minimum number of affordable housing?
I guess I'm not sure why we couldn't do that. Or even if you want to do the 10%, you say starting at X number of housing, you have a minimum requirement. If you wanted to run it that way.
Okay.
And the minimum can be a step function relative to the size of the development, right? So if your development is, under 10, your minimum is 1. If your development is, 10 to 50, you have a minimum number of, you can come up with a number. And that gives the developers like kind of more flexibility in terms of what they do.
I think maybe I know I didn't describe my initial thoughts well. I think that's kind of what I was thinking. But if a developer wanted to put in 2 homes and then we required an additional affordable, that seems pretty onerous to me. That's why I was saying maybe start it at 5 or 6 instead of the 10 that I think is currently in the article. But I think you and I, Rachel, are talking about a similar thing. I think.
It does sound similar. Through the chair, I like the idea of starting less than 10. I feel like there will be pushback, and we will need to get some input from developers to make it feasible for them financially. So, and I assume John would be telling us right now if there was a statutory limit on some of this wording that we're talking about changing. So I think that we're good there.
Yeah, I mean, all this wording is a little specific, so I don't know how the statutory requirements would come in. There's no, to my knowledge, no state requirement that you provide affordable housing with any developments. That's kind of why 40Bs exist. If you don't have affordable units, then you're open to 40Bs. And if you do have an inclusionary bylaw that provides for affordable housing, so you stay on top of the new housing stock while also providing affordable units, then you avoid the 40B process. I think that's kind of how they're more carrot in a way than stick. Yeah. So.
Good.
Other folks? Please, yeah, Elise.
My thoughts, I like where you and Rachel are going with this. My suggestion would be, I feel like 5 is too low a number. Maybe something more like 8, because then it's under 10, but it still feels closer to 10. So it might not be as scary for the developers to hear that number. I also feel cost-wise, I mean, I'm no expert in construction, but I feel like cost-wise, if we started at a higher number like 8, or even 9, I feel like 8 might be better. It would just be more financially feasible for them.
Ron.
Yeah, One issue about affordability is if we put the number of units too low and require an affordable unit, we may be inadvertently pushing developers to build more expensive homes, and kind of we'll be going in the other direction of what we want to do to make Hopkinton, because they've got to make more money per unit to be able to come up with that one affordable unit per every 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever the number is. So it's just, sometimes I worry about the unintended consequences of what seems like a good idea ultimately ends up with us having more $1 million plus homes being built in Hopkinton and nothing in the $500,000 price point.
I hear that. Here is my musings. I don't see a whole lot of less than $1 million homes being built anyway.
Sure.
As I look around, it seems like nothing that is being built is south of $700,000-800,000 maybe.
I think Chuck mentioned to me that the average lot sells for $350,000. So if the land is starting at $350,000, I mean, it doesn't take much to get to $800,000 on a house.
What I wonder though, what size that lot is.
Oh, I can chime in on that if I may. My neighbor just listed her house for $350,000. I'm in downtown. I think her lot's like 5,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
It's an old house, so I think she's just selling it for the land value. I'm sure it'll sell very quickly.
So when I was thinking, I think I'm clarifying my own thinking on my original plan. That 5 is where it kicks in. So just hear me out. I think my thought was, if you're building anywhere from 5 to 14 new homes, then you're required one affordable, which on average then the middle would be that 10%. If you choose to build more homes, then you can have less than 10%. And then by necessity, those would be smaller homes on smaller lots. And that might encourage more attainable housing than we're getting. So the way to mitigate the affordable home is let me sell more homes of less value so that my percentage of affordable required actually drops if you build 11 homes on a new plot that you purchased instead of 7 mega homes or something like that. I thought it might be a way to encourage the more attainable home in addition to an affordable. John?
So I don't know if this is where you were going or if you had done the math, but if you start at 5 units and then require 10%, you're kind of achieving, I think, what you were saying with going at every 10 units. Because if you round 5, 10% of 5 is going to be essentially half a unit. So you round up. And you can always say, you round to the nearest whole number. A lot of these places we have, you round to the next whole number, like in the EV parking, but you can put it in the bylaw. It says round to the nearest whole number. So then you get to 14 units. You still only have to do 1.
Yep. Until
you get to 15, and then you got to do. So that would be saying, starting at 5 units, you need to provide 10% affordable housing. And then that's kind of a very simple way of saying it.
I think that's exactly, although it was muddled when I tried to get it out, I think that's exactly what I was thinking. Okay. With part of the upshot being, I hope that would encourage more homes to balance out the lower threshold for the affordable, and those more homes to fit on the same size of land would be smaller lots, smaller, more attainable homes, was my thought, I think.
Through the chair. I don't know if that is actually the calculus that works for the developers, but it's a nice thought, Ted. I like the creativity. I just wanted to open it up to just completely off the current bylaw thinking on affordable housing. And that is somehow that the pool of money that developers have paid into in lieu of building an affordable unit, that we somehow get local developers to work together to build affordable units, to use some of that money perhaps, land purchased by CPC or funded by CPC, and then, perhaps for their next development, they're going to donate some of the labor when they're doing a development nearby. They're going to donate labor to do, so this is some of the things that have come up in my in some of the affordable housing subcommittee, and it just trying to think, and it's not for today to solve any of this, but just try to get more people thinking about how we could accomplish this. We do have a fund. We have, I think, over $1 million in it right now, from payments in lieu. And just going out and buying a house is not probably going to be the most efficient way of using that, particularly at market rates. But if there's some way we can tap into the expertise of local developers, and give them a break on the next development and affordable housing, and help use those funds to build some units, it would be great, I think, so.
John, I saw your hand pop up, but Mary, that was my other point to talk about on this proposed article, is how effective is that payment in lieu? Is that producing what we're hoping for? When does that payment come? So, John?
So I can answer that question after I say something. Mary, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. That system sounds like it would be a nightmare for procurement because the town would have the money. So then you'd have to go and bid out the project to get developed. And I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't work. I'm just saying we need a procurement officer on staff, which we are still searching for to get that done.
Fair enough. So there's a lot of complications with it that we need to figure out.
And maybe that fund doesn't need to follow procurement laws, or how it works. I don't know, but we would need a lot of vetting to make sure that we're spending that money legally. But to your point, nothing has been done with this money so far. Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board in the last few months has just gotten off their feet. They're holding regular meetings, which is something they've never done before. They're fully staffed, or fully appointed, I should say. And they are trying to come up with a strategy to use that money. One of the strategies that I think is low-hanging fruit is to potentially purchase the affordability on expiring affordable units. So there's certain units in town that have their affordability expiring in 2030 or 2030 something, because originally and currently you need to at least make affordable units affordable for a 30-year term. So if they weren't done in perpetuity, they may only have a 30-year affordability term, and then that eventually expires and they become market rate units. What the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board is looking at is potentially reaching out to those owners of those units and saying, what would you take to have the term limited affordability changed to a in perpetuity affordability on your deed? Is that $10,000? Is that $500,000? Where do we stand? And then potentially purchasing that affordability in perpetuity to make sure that the units that we currently have on the subsidized housing inventory remain on the subsidized housing inventory and don't fall off. They're also going to eventually look at working with smaller unit developers who are interested in doing affordable but don't know the bureaucracy and the whole state system to get that, to give them money to offset the cost of doing that type of thing. Because for these developers, those affordable units are not required. So they would be doing those voluntarily. And so it may be, a nice balance to pay for some of that expertise to come in and get the job done. And then, other strategies as they come up. I know that they are talking with Westboro's Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board on their strategies, and they're a little bit more active. They're actually buying units, fixing them up so that they meet code, and then selling them as affordable units, and basically taking the loss on the difference between what they purchased for, the cost of the work, and then the sales price. And that's the money from the fund that they have. So there's a bunch of different strategies that they're exploring right now, but for right now, nothing's been done with the money, but there is progress.
So let me just ask this then. Let me be entirely pessimistic for a moment. And let's say that our Affordable Housing Trust can't come up with a system that works to achieve more affordable housing. As I read what you typed up, John, it says that the funds in lieu are allowed only by the planning board through a grant. What would allow the planning board to say no, will not accept?
Grant of a special permit.
Oh, is that not the funds in lieu? Wait a minute.
So the are you looking at the bylaw proposed?
I'm looking at the bylaw 21062.
It would, so right now, the planning board has the discretion to, if a developer comes up and says, I am required to provide one affordable unit. I don't want to do that.
Right.
I want to do a payment in lieu.
Right.
The planning board right now, with no other approvals, because they're already under the special permit process, can waive that requirement and allow them to do payments in lieu. The change proposed in the bylaw would be that you have to provide the unit, and you don't have to get a special permit to do that. You have to provide the unit. And if you don't want to provide the unit on site or make a payment in lieu, you can get a special permit to do that.
Oh.
It's a separate, so it's basically taking the special permit requirement away from the whole system and just making it for off-site or payment in lieu requests. If you do an affordable unit on site, go for it. No approvals.
But you don't need to get approved to do the payment in lieu. That is an option that's available always.
So right now, if you are required to do an affordable unit, so Chamberlain Wayland is an example. They were required, they had 29 units. They're required to do 2 units.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. They requested, because they already had to get a flexible community development special permit for some reason. So they, as part of their subdivision process, they also submitted this special permit. Within the special permit, the planning board, since they're already in the process, the planning board can waive that requirement to do an on-site unit. They can do a payment in lieu because they're already in the special permit process, which is required. This would change it so that they would not have needed to go through the special permit process unless they wanted to do a payment in lieu. If they wanted to do a unit on site, they wouldn't need a separate special permit for that. Right now, as it stood, they would need a separate special permit for that.
Okay. Can the planning board deny the payment in lieu for any reason that they want, or do they have to have a set of guidelines for?
So I think in the bylaw, and I don't have it open right now, I believe there's a determination that the planning board needs to be made, that the planning board needs to make in order to grant that special permit.
Okay.
That's my
Let me-
recollection as well, is
Yeah,
that
let me-
you don't have blanket capability to just say, nope, you have to do it.
Yeah, so it says such special permit may only be issued, or may be issued only. That's a weird way of writing it. Such special permit may only be issued where the planning board makes a specific finding that there will be a significant net benefit to achieving the town's affordable housing objectives as a result of allowing the construction or rehabilitation of a dwelling unit on a different locus than the development or a payment in lieu. So the board in the special permit decision would need to make that finding.
Okay. So that means then, and I'm sorry if I'm dense, that means if we think that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is not working well, once we give it some years to work, that can be reason enough for the planning board to say the payment in lieu is not going to benefit our town.
Yeah, I mean, if the developer makes the argument, says, well, you have an affordable housing trust, they have a big account, this will help them do more of their goals, blah, blah, blah. And the planning board can say, well, there's $2 million in the account, they've spent none of it. They've never created an affordable unit, so we don't think they need more money in that account. We think we need you to build you a unit.
Okay, cool. Elise?
Through the chair, I have a question. Are we allowed to ask for more money in the payment in lieu, or is that set by the state?
It is set by the state.
Okay,
So
are we
our
allowed
bylaws-
to add an additional town?
So
tax
in the
or-
bylaws, it says that the amount should be calculated by the DHCD formula. So we could remove that requirement and say the amount should be, and then come up with another formula. The challenge is going to be, if a developer doesn't like that and sues the town saying it's arbitrary, what's the defense that the town has? We need to come up with a solid formula for calculating affordable housing costs. And it needs to be something that isn't constant, because then we're changing zoning constantly. So that's why we kind of just defaulted on the DHCD formula, which is not great, but we don't have, I mean, I haven't done the research to come up with a multiplier that would specifically apply to Hopkinton to say, do the DHCD formula and then add this multiplier to bring it up to Hopkinton prices. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, just saying, I don't know if that data exists.
Forgive my ignorance. I don't know how much they have to pay. Is it like the cost of selling one of their units at market price, roughly like 10% of that, 50%?
So it's DHCD has this Excel spreadsheet in a formula base where you plug in a couple numbers and it spits out a number.
Okay.
Generally you factor in interest rates, HOA costs, property taxes, purchase price, and then income. And then you put all those items in, and that spits out a number, and you basically change the purchase price until the number that's at the bottom matches what the purchase price is. So it's always low in Hopkinton because the income is what income based on payment amount is higher in Hopkinton than it is in other communities that are part of the metropolitan statistical area or whatever geographic region they use. We're basically greater Boston, essentially, right? So they kind of average it out.
Recent payments have been what? About
$250?
Yeah. So way below market.
Yeah.
In Hopkinton. So
but we don't have any evidence aside from anecdotal evidence to say it should be this rather than that, because housing in Hopkinton is more expensive. We don't have that information to say how much more. So we basically just be, throwing darts at a wall. And then I think we would open ourselves up to legal problems with that. But it's not to say that that's not an option. It's just, I don't think we have the data at this point to make our own formula.
Okay. Yeah, we need a lot more research. All right, thank you.
My thoughts are there any new thoughts on this article? I realize I've been using the word thoughts a lot tonight. I don't know if that's good or if I need a thesaurus. But here's what I propose for the committee. I feel fine with the fees and lieu section. Thank you, John, for clarifying a question or two. I feel fine with where that is. And I agree that if it's producing home values that are ridiculously low for Hopkinton, that's no good, but we're kind of stuck, it sounds like. What I'd like to suggest is, unless there's immediate reason not to, that John, if you could rewrite the other section with that 5 to 14, one affordable, 15 to 24, two affordable, and we think on that a little more, maybe ask some questions from other people. I think, Ron, you might be right. They might never make more attainable housing, but I don't think they're making it anyway. And we at least get more affordable at a lower threshold. It may have just as many big houses as before, but we're going to get an affordable earlier, I think, if we adjust downward a little bit. And maybe it's a pipe dream of mine. Maybe it produces more attainable, maybe not, but I don't think we lose any ground. In fact, we're getting an affordable unit or a payment in lieu at a lower threshold. So my proposal, unless anybody really doesn't like it, is, John, if you could rewrite it with those ranges, with the rounding, the way that you described it, and then we could send that out and maybe one more discussion and a vote on this next time. Does that sound okay to everybody? Awesome.
Can I use discretion in writing that section?
Of course.
To achieve the goals that you're looking to without the particular strategy.
Of course. I mean, clearly my wording was pretty abysmal as I tried to share it. So that's why you get paid and I don't. Anything else on this one? I am mindful that the Green Committee is still here, and I want to be able to make sure that we talk about EV cars. We good to move on? Fantastic. All right. Our last agenda item is John's proposed zoning article with EV parking spaces. I find it helpful for myself to underline the line that says what the purpose is so that we can keep that in mind as we have whatever discussion. So I have underlined the purpose of this bylaw is to support this mode shift to electric vehicles and encourage ongoing efforts to reduce the impact of fossil fuels on the environment and work towards carbon neutrality, et cetera, et cetera. Having read through, I just had one really minor question, so I'll hold mine off. Anyone else have thoughts, having had more chance to digest what John proposes? Go ahead.
I just had one question on the rounding under D2. I like, John, what you said before about rounding to the nearest whole number. That just to me seems more fair, and rounding up to the next highest number, I don't know, but that's other than that, I really like the proposal, and the developers that I've talked with said they're moving in this direction anyway, so it didn't appear to be a major hardship anyway.
So
Thanks,
I guess, can I respond to that? I guess my aim for the next whole number was to be a little aggressive on this because it's, I understand that it is an added cost to developers, but I think that the amount of spaces required is not super onerous, and therefore rounding to the next whole number just ensures just that one more space that we might get, rather than letting them not do that one space, right? And so it's not really a big difference, but I think it's just that extra, like, we're serious about this, so just do the next whole space kind of a thing. And I want to say we also have that same, I'd have to look, but I think we have that same requirement in the parking spaces. You don't get to round to the nearest whole number. You always provide one extra space if you're a fraction for parking spaces in general. And so it was also keeping consistent with that parking.
Oh, that makes sense.
I like the aggressiveness in this case. Other comments from the committee? Yeah, go ahead, Mary, please.
So I like it as written. As you know, I don't understand all of the parts of it, granted, but I like it as written.
Anybody else?
I would just say, second the thoughts. I like it as it's written. Some of the technical aspects of it, I'm having difficulty understanding, but I'm sure as we ingest more information, it'll get clear.
Thanks. SGC folks, any thoughts? Anything you'd like to see adjusted, changed, or is this what you had in mind? I guess silence is acceptance. John? Oh, no, wait, Rachel, go ahead.
Sorry, I had a question. I don't know if it's for the Sustainable Growth Committee or maybe to John. Has there been any review or data collected about the impact of EV cars on residential electric bills, given that people will be doing some charging at home, maybe not all of it, but some charging? Has there been any impact on the average household for new regulations about EV cars?
So I don't know if there's any data on that. I'm sure the SGC people could answer that, but I don't necessarily see, I don't want to be really harsh with this, but I don't know why it's our problem, because we're not requiring people buy EVs. So if it's a cost to them to charge it, that's a decision they're making. Does that answer your question? Kind of.
I will say that it will cost far less to charge at home than to fill up your car at a gas station. Nicole has a couple EVs, so she can answer this better.
Hopefully.
1.5.
Yeah. So yes, the cost, I mean, it would increase your electric bill because you are adding more electric usage. But if you compare that difference or what it takes to charge your car compared to putting gas in your car, it is significantly less expensive to operate.
And that's probably
John, your hand popped
a
up?
more polite way than answering the question than mine.
John, before Rachel's question, your hand popped up, I thought?
Yes. 1 second. I just want to let everyone know, I would recommend not voting on this tonight because I had it reviewed as part of my class for municipal government by town council and many other towns. And they suggested including the technical information in regulations passed by the planning board. So this would basically just enable, a lot like how we have some of our bylaws, this would enable the planning board or whoever to execute it, but then they could also establish regulations that can be updated through the planning board process rather than the town meeting process when technology advances. So it's basically saying you have to do this number of spaces and all that kind of stuff, but the details of the charging stations and the details of the level of power will be set forth in regulations adopted by the planning board. We do that, stormwater bylaw is empowers this planning board to regulate stormwater, but then the stormwater regulations, which don't have to go through town meeting, can be updated to keep up with that. And there's other bylaws like that. And I think that's a good change. So I'm going to try and change it a little bit to incorporate that. And then I can send it out to you guys for the next meeting.
I think that was a lot of the stuff most of us were saying we don't understand anyway, and we're trusting you. I think. So I had, in the same section that Ron pointed to, I had, although not part D, which was, I think, Ron's question, I'm looking at part C. And as I demonstrated pretty clearly earlier, I think I can do math. I can't explain math very well. It seems like there's a lack of consistency going from B to C to D as far as EV either plugins or setting up the infrastructure for them. It goes from 5 to 10 and then 11 to 24. Why not go? So here's what I propose. And then maybe, John, you can explain my math the way you did last time. I'm wondering if it shouldn't be in C, 11 to 20, 2 EV installed spaces or 4 EV ready. And then after that, the 10% kicks in. It seems to me that at every level, we go from 1 to 2, we go from 2 to 4 for the EV ready, and then we go to the percentages. It's a 10 parking space jump for B and C. Keep the increase equal. You go from 10 to 20, you go from 1 to 2, or you go to 2 to 4. Does that make some sense to anybody? I think it's pretty minor anyway, but it strikes me as more mathematically consistent. And then when we hit 20 plus, then we go to the percentages. Did I lose everybody? Mary, you gave me a kind of a nod.
No, it made sense. But then when I'm like talking, so once it's up to 20 or more, then 10% of total spaces. So that would be 2. So if you're already at 2 with 11 to 20, then 20.
Then we're rounding up.
Oh, then 21 would be 2.1. So that would end up being 3.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Then it would make sense. Yeah.
So that would do, I am suggesting changing C to 11 to 20 parking spaces, keep the 2 EVSE installed, but change it to 4 EV ready. And then for D, parking areas with 21 spaces or more, shall provide 10 and 20 rounded up to the nearest whole. It's a small correction, but I think it makes it more mathematically consistent.
I am okay with it, keeping the consistency. I don't have an argument for or against it.
Yeah, the intent I think was just to be a little bit more aggressive, but I don't see why it really matters, and that's a more consistent, defensible
I think that my proposal is more aggressive on the bigger parking lots, but it backs off just a little bit on the medium parking lots.
Yep. I see no problem changing it to that.
Any other thoughts? There's that word again. All right. So then, John, if you take it back and take in whatever feedback you get from your class and town council, and maybe make that number switch in C and D, then maybe hopefully we can vote on that the next time. One more time, Sustainable Green Committee, are you cool with my correction adjustment? I think, again, I made it more aggressive on the larger parking lot slightly, and I moderated the medium size just a touch.
I guess I don't have it in front of me, but I'm trying to think that, so it was the 11 to 25. Is that really only changing anything about that 21 to 25?
So there's two types of installments, right? I think I'm not really touching the EVSC installed, except to say a third one needs to be installed right when you hit your 21st parking space, not your 25th. So in that way, it's more aggressive. Where I'm backing off is if you have 20 parking spaces, you can go from 5 to 4 EV ready. And what I'm trying to do is have consistency in the ladder of more stuff.
But I think when you're writing it, you can actually collapse C and D into the same thing, because I think the math would work from 11 on. It would just be 5 to 10 that you would be clarifying. And then I think C and D, you could really just use the rules for D, starting with 11 spaces.
That might be true.
I think it's a little off. Like in this case, I think it's at the 10%, we are not rounding off till 20. If we make it a general rule, like I also thought that, like it's almost like 10 and 20% again, but the lower end, we're rounding off to the lower end for 5 to 20, but the higher end after 20. So round numbers make sense. So I may be confused. I thought.
All right. Well, why don't we do this? John, if you could write up that change, and if it does make sense to combine C and D as percentages, if that works out.
I think it does, to be honest. Just thinking about if you had 11 spaces, you'd be required to do, if you go by the 10%,
you'd have to round up to 2.
You'd have to round up to 2. And so you'd be rounding up to 2 from 11 to 20.
Right.
And then at 21, you'd be rounding up to 3. So I think it does make sense.
It simplifies the law a little bit. And again, I think it does make it more aggressive on the bigger parking lot, and maybe backs off just a touch on only the EV ready part. Okay, cool. So
would you say combine C and D?
I think if the math works out, it makes it more clear. Yeah, it's less wording. It's less puzzling out to figure for a developer. Yeah. So yeah. Cool. If you'll make those changes, maybe hopefully we can vote on that next time as well.
Mm-hmm.
That, I believe, gets us to the end of the agenda because we already voted on the minutes. Does anybody have anything last? Comments, questions, hopes for the future? No? Oh, yes. Please, Nicole.
I was just wondering, when I came the last time, I was asking about EV charging at multifamily housing, and I think where we left off was that would have to be something totally separate, and this bylaw couldn't apply to it. I just wanted to confirm that that's the case, or we don't know anything more. I wasn't able to find any more information. So because it's a different type of zoning, this bylaw couldn't also apply to housing, correct?
Yes. So in Hopkinton, housing is exempt from site plan review, and this is only triggered through site plan review.
Okay.
So we would have to change the applicability of it. And I don't know I think we said it would need to be done separately, because I don't know what applicability you could do to include commercial and residential units.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Because I think I just didn't fully understand why it's different or how to get it to apply.
I mean, you could do a blanket if you need to provide parking in general. This is how it goes. But that then gets tricky with like single family homes, because they also need to provide parking. So it would, I think personally, I think it would be cleaner to do it separately. Have site plan apply to commercial, industrial, office, municipal, all that type of use, and then have something separate for residential, only because residential and everything else are treated very differently throughout the bylaws.
Makes sense. Thanks for clarifying.
I think though, Nicole, I think that if you wanted to work on a residential multifamily bylaw, I think we'd be very happy to have a look and talk about it.
I would agree with that. The other thing I just remembered, currently, I think we did the research, and multifamily is not allowed in Hopkinton at the moment. So it's not necessarily a pressing issue until and if MBTA communities is passed. But it would be good to have something in place should that happen.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It works with our MBTA upcoming discussion. Anything else? Was that a yes? Was that Jeff something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all one more time for your time and the great questions. And like you attended or asked us to attend regularly, you as well are welcome to attend our regular meetings as well. The full Sustainable Green Committee is 15 strong. We meet about once a month. But if you ever want to have a smaller group discussion, the four of us that attended tonight are the Climate Action Work Group, and we can meet practically weekly sometimes. So happy to chat anytime.
I would say to everybody, and at least maybe EHOP can talk to this, it's really easy, although I can't remember how I did it, but it's really easy to get mailings from the town with agendas for every single committee in town. And while I get those, and it's true that a lot of them I delete without ever opening, the committees that I'm interested in, I open every time. I look at the agendas. It tells me which meetings I might want to listen to, which ones I might want to show up for. When I got signed up, it was because my wife was president of EHOP, and she showed me exactly how to do it. If you haven't done that, I encourage you to talk to Elise, and I bet you she can get you set up immediately.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I love EHOP. I'll root for EHOP every day of the week.
It is
All right.
easier to navigate than the town website.
If there's nothing else at 8:32, I'd love a motion to adjourn.
So move.
And a second, Elise?
Oh, sorry. Do we have a next meeting date?
Oh, I don't know. John?
Right now, we have it as the 28th.
Okay, sorry. I missed the last one, so I just.
So
sorry
I will say
I'm sorry.
that's after Thanksgiving, and I am probably not going to be able to prepare for that since I will be out of town for some of those days.
there's a tentative CPC meeting on that day too. It
So
is
the one
just
after
still
that-
tentative.
The one after that would be December 12th.
Does anyone have any real reason to say December 12th is a bad idea? Great. Why don't we go with December 12th then? All right. I think there was a motion to adjourn and a second. I believe, Elise, you were the second. Yes. Let's do a vote on adjourning. Where's my list again? I know I got you on the screen, but I like this list. There it is. All right. Motion to adjourn. Mary Larson Marlowe.
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Ron Foyson.
Yes.
Nisha.
Yes.
Madhu.
Yes.
Rachel.
Yes.
Elise.
Yes.
And Ted Barker Hook is also a yes. Unanimous.
Night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.